Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's panel discussion. We are joined by a handful of heavy-hitting Zero Trust evangelists who are ready to offer up insights and recommendations for achieving Zero Trust in 2021. Before I hand it over to Jason Garbus, who's going to be our host today, quick reminders. So the first reminder is you can ask questions. Please submit those via the GoToWebinar widget under the questions section, and we'll see if we can answer those at the end of today's discussion. We also have 4 PDFs available in the handout section related to today's topic. And throughout the discussion, we're going to be sending through some various links that are also relevant to the topics that we're going to be talking about. So with that, Mr. Jason Garbus, please take it away.
Great, thank you, and welcome to our panel discussion. We're really looking forward to this today. I think it's going to be interesting and educational for everyone. I'm Jason Garbus. I'm Senior Vice President of Products here at Appgate, and I'm responsible for and focus on our Zero Trust offering we call Appgate SDP. I also have a volunteer role where I'm co-chair of the SDP Zero Trust Working Group in the Cloud Security Alliance. So in that role, I have a lot of opportunity to speak to a great deal of enterprises, whether they're customers or prospects or folks that are involved at the CSA. Enjoy talking about this, listening to people's stories and learning about it. And we're going to have a great discussion today. We're joined by a number of panelists. First up, of course, is Dr. Chase Cunningham, who is Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester and leads their Zero Trust research practice. So welcome, Chase.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And we have 2 enterprises represented here, folks who are both Appgate SDP customers. First up is Jalen Zimmerman. Jalen is Senior Enterprise Architect at SecureWorks. And SecureWorks, of course, is a leading provider of managed security services, helping protect their clients' most valuable assets. So welcome, Jalen. Great. And Jeremy Odo. Jeremy is Director of Technology at the Third Floor. The Third Floor is a leading visualization studio providing artistic and technical services in works for major films, television series, games, VR, and themed attractions. Many of the things that we enjoy consuming and seeing have gone through Jeremy's team there. So welcome, Jeremy. Great. Okay, so between Jeremy and Jalen, I think we've got 2 very different types of organizations and very different perspectives. And of course, Chase has, he probably spends 8 hours a day at least talking to enterprise customers and thinking about and talking about Zero Trust. So we're looking forward to hearing the stories of these 2 enterprises. And Chase, we'd love to have you kick this off and talk a little bit about kind of where we are today in the market perspective. We think about what's happened in the last year around security, the big shift driven by COVID and work from home. And you've kind of capped all this off with a recent publication of the Zero Trust Extended Ecosystem Wave. Would love to get your perspective of kind of what's happened and what you've seen in the market, both from the vendor side as well as from the enterprise side.
Yeah, so I mean, really, the thing is what hasn't happened this year. I mean, we've seen everything from near zombie apocalypse to just everything continuing to change. All of our kids have never left the house. It's just been constant iteration, really. But what's been most significant in the Zero Trust space has been March 13th, 2020 is effectively the day that I call ZT Day, because that's the day the perimeter died. That's the day that the kind of guidance came out from the government and whatever else that said, everyone go figure out how to be outside of offices. And we all went home. And from then on, the conversation flipped from, I think we have sort of a defensible edge. We can kind of stay inside of our castle and moat thingy and we'll keep the bad guys out, to now everybody's everywhere. We're all remote. All of our homes are now satellite offices, essentially. And we've become this big amalgamated mush of enterprise infrastructure. And because of that, the argument about not living in a perimeterless world is gone. I mean, this is how it is. So this morning, actually, I saw data that came back from a recent study that said this transition is now essentially permanent, where 27% of the global workforce will never return to an office, which is staggering. I mean, that number is huge. And what that means is this is how things are going to be. So the ZT strategy side of this equation has effectively been in dominus patria filisanti, like this is how thou shalt live for the foreseeable future. And because of that, the vendors in the space have aligned to enable this technology and to make it where we've gone from a world where you had to be kind of a security practitioner to do security things. Like you used to have to tell people how to fire up a VPN, how to log in, how to, you know, make all these other things work. Now we're moving into a space where zero trust solutions, especially from platform providers and SDP and some of these other capability offerings, are making it like when you get in your car. You just get in your car, plug in your seatbelt and drive. You don't think about clicking and turning on the airbag. You don't think about, you know, setting up the nav and whatever else. It's all part of the experience, which is what we're getting to. And that was what stood out during the wave evaluation, was the vendors in the space that had aligned to the reality of the operating components, and had really dialed in on making this part of the user experience, but also part of a long-term enablement was the big difference maker.
Yeah, it is remarkable just to think about how big a shift that we've all lived through and how dramatic it was. And I know, Jeremy, let's talk about your scenario, because you know your organization was very much an on-premises work in the office for some good reasons. We'd love to talk about how this shift, how the work from home really impacted your team.
Yeah, definitely. So it did impact us greatly, obviously. And what Dr. Chase was saying is totally true. Like everybody was kind of like, you know, the day hit and it was like, okay, well, everybody go leave. We have a lot of clients that need to protect their IP. We work on a lot of large scale movies. The Marvel franchise is one of the top ones that we work on. And with the last 22 movies that they made, it was cresting into this big story arc. And because of that, we really needed to protect that IP and make sure that nothing leaked out. We get put into very strict security environments. And when this hit, one of the mandates for us is that we need to keep all of our data local and make sure that, you know, it's not spidering out into other locations. So I got a call from Disney, like basically that day, and said, okay, what's your plan? And I told him how we're approaching this with zero trust model. And they're like, great, go for it, keep running. So we had a lot of support from the studios to adopt this approach and run with it.
That's great. That's great. How about yourself, Jalen, your organization?
So when the coronavirus started at SecureWorks, we had begun our zero trust journey several years ago, but users still primarily used a traditional VPN to access our environment. And as everybody went home overnight, we activated our business continuity plans. We closed the physical SOCs in 2 of our main locations in Bucharest and Atlanta and Chicago. Folks moved home, and work continued really without interruption. The VPN aggregators weren't overloaded. We didn't have to, you know, add additional bandwidth. The biggest reason we found that we didn't have to make a change, or that we had a seamless transition to working remote, was we're a smaller company. We're spread all over the world. And we had already done work to take the Office 365 latency sensitive traffic and move it outside of the VPN scope. But that quickly realized we need to aggressively start to deploy things like Appgate and our VPN-less employee solution to just essentially, this is permanent now. When we talk about employees now, we don't talk about remote employees. We just talk about employees. We've taken the remote out. And that has really led us in the past year, past 9 months since this started, to very aggressively rip and replace large chunks of our, they were brownfield environment, but now we can greenfield things and very aggressively move our plans for zero trust forward.
Yeah, that's great. And that kind of brings us to the second topic, which is, we hear this a lot. How do I get started with zero trust? Where do I go? And I think you mentioned something really interesting, which is this mindset shift of, hey, we don't have remote employees, we just have employees. And I don't need to worry about a remote access solution. I need an access solution, because what's one of the principles of zero trust? It's secure access for all users and for all resources, regardless of where they are. And it really becomes transparent. And I know we talked about in some of our previous calls, Jalen, you're definitely moving to a cafe style network where everyone's off the network and everyone's logically remote all the time. How did your organization kind of begin that shift or begin that journey to zero trust?
Sure. So yes, there is a longer story for us. Back in 2017, we realized that perimeter-based security was not in our future. SecureWorks needed to scale globally. We needed to begin to collaborate and interact seamlessly with customers and partners. And our workload was moving to the cloud, both in SaaS services that users consume and in preparing to close our physical data centers because we saw public cloud being finally secure enough to host our workload. So we put together a team of a partnership between IT and the security group and put together a 3 to 5 year plan, a strategy saying we are going to fundamentally transform or rebuild our internal security model to zero trust. And back in 2017, there weren't a lot of real offerings on the market. We evaluated 30 zero trust offerings back then. The majority of them were kind of name grabs, take what we have, put zero trust on it, get some market share real quick. Other things that we tried were tech demos. We heard things like, oh, you want backups with that? Well, we can add it to the product roadmap. So that didn't induce a lot of confidence. But then we found Appgate. Appgate was fully operationalized, had years of experience, it essentially just slotted into our larger enterprise architecture to provide secure transit between a user and direct access to the workload wherever it is in the world that they need to access. So when we found that, we locked onto that as kind of the network transit or SDP part of our zero trust implementation that we're following.
So that's great, and it's terrific to see. First of all, that kind of top-down organizational buy-in and drive. Even 3 years ago, you were definitely ahead of the curve, and that you were doing it in a very thoughtful way. And clearly, being a provider of security services, you're kind of saturated in the market, and I think that definitely helped you. Now, Jeremy, your organization, your adoption of the Appgate SDP product, I know was I don't want to say tactical, let's say it was very rapid, certainly. How did that fit into an overall zero trust philosophy and framework and journey for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have been kind of looking at zero trust and evaluating it and looking to see how that model could apply to us. We find ourselves sometimes in our client's location, so sometimes we don't have the latitude to move the way that we'd like to in the network. But we have been looking at zero trust and evaluating it and seeing how it could fit in. And like everybody's been saying, when the panic hit, we had to quickly adopt. And we did choose Appgate really rapidly, and we stood it up really rapidly. I think, start to finish, it took us 4 days to get it in place and get people on it and onboarded. And we're also a smaller facility. We only have about 250 people. And so it wasn't too tragic to rapidly onboard them. But what Jalen said is really important. With Appgate, we were able to layer this on and kind of slot it into our infrastructure without a lot of work. Obviously, we were burning the midnight oil those 4 days, but that's a rapid time to deployment. And so we were able to kind of layer that on top and strategically place it so that we were able to minimize our downtime, which was critical to us. We had people working in the studio up until basically the day we cut over.
That's great. So Chase, would love to get your perspective on that, how that lines up with other organizations you've seen, or if you have any follow-up questions for Jeremy or Jalen, please take it away.
Well, I think we've done a bunch of research on this and published we've published a practical guide to ZT. We've published things about the DARTS methodology, like all these sort of things about answering the question of kind of where and when you should start and how you wrap your head around that. And there's kind of a line in the sand between organizations that have been historically heavily compliance focused that honestly were further along in the realm of ZT stuff because they had to be to do business. And then there's everybody else that kind of had to get thrown into this and say, adapt or die, and has come rushing into that. And that's where I think there's this whole thing about really being able to push it down to the user, the entity, whatever you want to call it, and make it where they're able to do what they need to do. Because let's face it, a problem we've had in the security space for, I don't know, a decade has been we've been forcing everybody to be security engineers when honestly most of them don't want to do that. They just want to do their job, and you shouldn't have to be. And that's been the difference of what these technology solutions are starting to enable is, hey, Joe that works in finance and Sarah that works in HR, guess what? You guys can just be your work role and do your thing. We're going to apply the controls and just pipe you where you need to go and limit the things that you could cause compromises with. I think that what we've finally seen over the last say 18 months in the space is a change of forcing everyone to know how to do security, and now we're in a space of security is just built into the infrastructure, and that would not have happened prior to software-defined infrastructure. This whole different approach.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting. The way you talked about that is that's kind of definitely the end goal, which is that zero trust security doesn't become a thing in its own right. It just becomes, hey, this is the way that we do security.
Yeah, and I mean that's too is a lot of folks will, and I'm doing a bunch of work in Australia right now where people bristle at this thing. Well, you don't trust my employees, whatever else. No, it's not about that. It's not like we're homies. I'm good. I'll shake your hand. I'll break bread with you, whatever. It's not that I don't like your people. I don't not trust them. It's that I don't trust that you might not accidentally introduce a compromise in my infrastructure that ruins the business and makes it where I can't pay you that paycheck. And the zero side of this is I'm going to remove as much of the default problems and much of the low-hanging fruit that an adversary would use to compromise this infrastructure. And I'm not going to give you the option otherwise. Like that's the difference. When you get in your car and it starts beeping, annoying you to plug your seatbelt in, basically that's it. Like you get in your vehicle, start driving, I'm going to tell you, buckle up.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about how organizations can help make the case for this. And in some instances, like what we heard from Jalen, is there was definitely a top-down strategic push for this. In many organizations, there's not. There's very often security leaders that want to do this because they know it's the right thing and a good way to do it. And a lot of times, the how do I get started isn't a technical issue. So Chase, would love to hear ways that you've seen organizations and security teams get buy-in from some of their peers, get budget, get time from folks, and overcome some of these more cultural or political barriers.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, there's been studies that have come back that said, I think it was 84% of consumers are at least hesitant to do business with a business that has been shown to have compromises. So like this is a competitive differentiator. And if you think about it from your perspective, if I have two banks that I might go put my little bit of money with, and one of them has been breached and has never sort of said how they've rectified the issue, and the other one has said, we have this strong commitment to security, this is how we enable it, it's part of the experience, blah, blah, blah. Who am I going to put my, my $10 worth? Because that's kind of all I have left now. But I mean, really, like that's the difference maker. This is a competitive differentiator. This is a business thing. This is not necessarily just more security for security. And I think what you get from the organizations that are aligning on this is C-suite and CISOs that are driving this forward can tell boards and CEOs and whatnot, like, look, we're doing this because it aligns to our business outcomes. This is not just me buying the next sexy, shiny cyber something or another and saying we're going to do this because I think it's neat.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an opportunity for Forrester, for example, to have some sort of zero trust certification for enterprises, something that can help them say, hey, I've got the stamp of approval, we've been audited, et cetera. Something that's going to be a little more forward looking as opposed to maybe something that's driven by legislation, which tends to be backward looking.
Yeah, there's never been legislation that's backwards looking ever.
Oh. So, Jeremy, did you encounter any kind of cultural or political obstacles in your organization? Please name names.
Yeah. Let me throw everybody under the bus. No, I'm really thankful that our organization needs to be thinking about security all the time. We need to make sure that our clients feel safe with us. Like Dr. Chase was saying, everybody trusts us that we're going to be securing their data. And the moment we lose that trust, the moment we lose those clients. And that would be really detrimental to our business, obviously. So we had buy-in from the top. Our CEO, CFO, they were standing behind this decision because they knew that we needed to figure out the security side of it to make our clients happy. Everybody, it was a very chaotic time. We're not through it yet, but at the moment that it happened, people were like really scrambling around trying to figure out how to approach this. And when our clients came to us and said, "What's your plan?" and we told them, and their comfort just, it was, you could just feel it coming through the emails, like, great, okay, we'll continue. So we had buy-in from the top, and it was, without that, it probably would have been more of a challenge, but thankfully we had everybody's support.
That's great. How about on your side, Jalen?
So we at SecureWorks, our team, we do IT strategy and innovation. And we've built a process where we have a portfolio of technology strategies relating to cloud, security, end user compute and collaboration, things like that. When we start a strategy, we go and interview 20 or so business leaders, VP and up, and we don't talk tech. We don't talk zero trust. We say, let's sit down for an hour and listen to your concerns about how can you work with remote employees? How do you work over the network today? And what we find is if there's lots of technical, tactical, knowledgeable folks to talk to about what they see, but the issues that bubble up to VP and above positions, those issues tend to be symptoms of deep areas that need deep and fundamental change. And as we interview across the leadership team, and they tell us what they need in the coming years and what their frustrations are with IT, with technology, with working remotely with folks, they become part of the conversation. They've shared their concerns. We hear that. We go build a business vision out of that. And they see that, and they see their personal input into that vision. And then we say, okay, over the next 3 to 5 years, here's a roadmap of what we're going to do. And then we start to talk technology, and we start to talk capabilities. But still, what the business leaders see is it's a business value mapping. It is not, we are going to go find something like Appgate. It's more, we're going to enable employees anywhere on any, a flexible choice of managed devices to be able to work no differently than if they were in the office. And that kind of approach has been very successful for us because it is rare you can get an entire horizontal leadership team all talking and thinking about the same thing. And when they do, that builds momentum for 3 to 5 years of execution. And what we found as we get into this, the technical people see Appgate and they use it, and the word of mouth spreads, and people start to demand it, and the business is demanding it. Why don't we have this? We need this quicker. And then we get dragged along, essentially. And that's what we want to be. We don't want to push new toys onto the business. We want to meet their needs at a business level, at a business need level. And so today, what we find is the more we move to zero trust, the easier it is to collaborate with customers and partners, the easier the sales process gets, the easier it is to spin up workload in remote areas, the easier it is for our red teams and our incident response teams to go out on site and securely connect back to workload wherever they're at in the world. And that just unlocks the business.
That's interesting. And there's so much new technology that we can take advantage of. And I know that you had mentioned in some of our prep calls how you've strategically made a decision that some fraction of your employees are going to be just using SaaS applications, and for them that's kind of one set of security and business processes. And then there's another fraction, which is the majority of employees have this type of hybrid access, and they're the ones that need access to some of these on-premises tools and systems, and they're utilizing, in this case, Appgate SDP to get to get to all those. And they're the ones that you're taking off the network. Actually, you're taking everyone off the network because it's either.
Sure. So Appgate is just one part of our larger security vision. We find that as we get into this, zero trust is not a destination. It's not something that you install and then you're done. We're 3 years in, and we easily see 2 more years of work. Zero trust as a model and as an implementation is maturing. New things are coming along. So what we didn't envision when we started is what we call the VPN-less employee. And today what we find is we very aggressively moved 2/3 of our workforce onto an Appgate-based kind of access solution. And these are people that access critical workload and infrastructure and that write code and that need to connect to our kind of our product, our intellectual property environments. 1/3 of our company is more business productivity focused. So a salesperson in the field, marketing, legal, HR, all of these folks are now consuming pure SaaS services over the internet. For them, when we issue them a laptop today, they don't have a VPN client, they don't have Appgate, they consume our own zero trust implementation. We send them a laptop, they open it up, they sign in with their credentials. The whole security stack downloads to the device and they're up and running in about 20 minutes. No IT touch and no VPN. And that's appropriate for that 1/3 of the company. But for our high value access, we base that on Appgate, SDP.
That's great. Any follow-up comments, Chase?
Yeah, I mean that's really where the evolution of ZT and the market itself is trending to, is just making it where these problems that are relatively solvable are something that's becoming more applicable in the space. You know, for a long time, the market was trying to come up with and people too were focusing on post-quantum encryption, you know, super hacker, stoppy, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And that's sexy and cool and looks good on a movie, but in reality, like, people get hacked because they click on stuff they shouldn't, they go places they shouldn't, and they use crappy passwords, and VPNs pipe bad guys in the networks. So if you can apply controls to these relatively binary simplistic problems and eliminate that threat space, then you can do all of the sexy, interesting, you know, Jason Bourne type stuff, and get to that later. And this is the difference between the application of strategy where the likelihood of compromise and adversaries operate, or trying to buy more things and apply them in more ways to hopefully solve a problem that might be actually presented to you. That's not how I like to operate. Like, it doesn't make business sense either to continually justify, you know, putting money into this expense in depth, when in reality you're not actually affecting the outcome of the game for your purposes.
Yeah, it's I like thinking about things that way, because you're definitely tying it to business teams. I mean, most of us are technologists and we love technology, but we can't put that first. We've got to put it, what problems are we solving? What pain do we have in the organization? And what can we unlock in terms of improving business efficiency? And I think, Jalen, your example was terrific, which is, it's probably a pretty clear difference between what it used to take to onboard an employee and the amount of friction and IT touch and overhead versus today.
Yeah, and what's interesting is our IT leaders hear almost daily from other orgs throughout the business stories of 3 years ago I could not have done what I do today, and that continually reinforces that we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, and that's definitely, you know, a huge victory for the security team, is when the business can do interesting and innovative things that were probably impossible to do or unrealistic to do before. Yeah. Jeremy,
there is nothing. Sorry, I was just going to say, there is nothing like a security company that specializes in applying security In a perimeter-based model, the more security you apply, the less you can actually do. And with a zero trust model, we can put up guardrails against like the worst things that would happen. And we can, rather than obsessing over risk and pulling back, we can build up trust and evaluate trust in devices, in users, in the services they're accessing, build that up in real time, and open up to let users collaborate and use services. So it goes from a very negative, almost, we can't be risky, we can't do anything, to a very positive, okay, we've got guardrails, we know who you are, we know what device you're on, you're using, services in the right fashion, so let's open up and enable collaboration. It's a fundamental thing for our company, huge culture change.
Yeah, if I can extend on that, we saw kind of the same thing happening. On-prem, our environment feels more draconian and more strict, and it's because we're using these technologies that are a little bit more heavy-handed, like switch ACLs and firewall rules for this, and we approach it on kind of the LAN segment level, but putting Appgate in, we're actually able to bring resources to our users that they weren't able to really get to easily on-prem. So their environment off-prem actually is a little bit more relaxed in the sense that they have a little bit more freedom. But as Jalen said, those guardrails are there, so we're protected and we feel safe in what they're doing. But that also did open up a little bit more freedom for them.
That's great to hear. Wondering if you can talk about some potential barriers. And obviously, Jeremy and Jalen, your organizations have been successful and are well down your journey. Chase, what have you seen in terms of clients who maybe they struggle or hit some speed bumps along the way?
I think primarily, and I mean, Jalen and Jeremy kind of talked about this, is number one is the leadership issue, where they don't have someone that actually has got a very clear, concise understanding of the realities of this whole thing. Like Jalen's saying, like, this is going to take us some time, and like Jeremy's saying, it is okay to have our more draconian on-prem stuff, but we're going to live in this model that's going to continue to go forward. And let me tell you why that's beneficial. If you don't have a business leader that can justify this stuff as far as an operational context and get the people at the board and CEO level to understand why this is an evolution, then it's dead on arrival. It's just not going to go anywhere. On the far side of that, if you're putting stuff in front of individuals that are going to live in this new model and you're telling them that life is going to get better and it doesn't get better, you've basically invalidated the approach which you're putting in front of them, and that continues to be a problem. So the technology evaluation for those organizations to do well is to really focus on where can I make my operational capabilities grow, and where can I push this in front of the individuals that have to live this way and make it where it is not harder for them to operate in a secure fashion daily. And when they do that, they see that it goes, further up to the right. And if they're just buying more ZT, then usually it's not going to go anywhere either, because like we've talked about here, ZT is not a product. Zero Trust is a strategy.
Yep, that makes sense. How about Jeremy or Jalen? Did you encounter any barriers across this journey that you would like to share?
I'll take that, Jalen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. So two. One we're still working with, the other I think we've moved past. So when people talk about zero trust, they often think in terms of remote access. So I need to replace my VPN. I need to address remote access into my environment. But zero trust quickly, once you solve the remote access part, then we find we have buildings full of hundreds of people on segregated user VLANs with devices that sit on a desk and never move, and physical network ports. And then we start to say, well, what about that? And so what we're doing in SecureWorks and what's, we're doing this after we deployed Appgate, is we have to pull users off of privileged VLANs, collapse them down to a single unprivileged, almost guest network. And if anybody wants to access workload from the office, they're essentially the same as a visitor, whether it's somebody on a managed laptop with a full security stack, an employee's mobile phone, or a guest coming in for the day on their own laptop. They all start from the same unprivileged guest environment, and then they traverse the internet to get to the workload that they need to, either through a CASB layer to a SaaS service, or via Appgate to SecureWorks critical workload and infrastructure. That replumbing of the physical facilities, going in, we didn't realize how much work that was going to be. And an interesting byproduct of COVID-19 is when you have an empty office, you can start unplugging switches and rebuilding, on-prem networks really quickly. You can turn off entire Wi-Fi networks. And when people come back into the office, as part of the program of here's how you come back in the office, here's how you do social distancing, here's the safety protocols, we're also going to put in place an educational kind of module of here's the single Wi-Fi network to connect to and what you can do over it. Here is why when you come back to the office, you'll be going direct to the internet, or you'll have to sign into Appgate, just like you do at home. So that physical space refactoring, we didn't realize that going in. The other thing that we're still working on, and we heard about this from Appgate at the beginning, is roles, role definition. So many companies today, you have users who have been there for many years, and the longer they're there, the more groups, Active Directory groups they become a member of over time, the more access to different tools and services they get. And it's very hard to back that access out of and say, okay, you do a new job, here's the new groups you should be a member of. Well, yeah, but I still need to access that old thing once in a while to provide support. And so you end up with this big pile of Active Directory groups granting access to things. And it is a large job, a significant job to audit that and track that and map that. And when you get into Zero Trust and want to kind of unify or normalize that access, a lot of that benefits from having a few simple roles. So I'm Jalen Zimmerman. I'm an employee of SecureWorks. I am in the IT organization, and I have an IT strategist role. Those four things should be able to define my entire access to everything I need to do at SecureWorks. So we're now starting this work. This is our focus. Now that we've deployed Appgate, for the next coming year, we're working on culture change, awareness, audit and compliance change, process change, to build out this role-based definition, because that maps right into an Appgate policy of saying everybody in the IT org can access this kind of workload, or everybody who's an IT strategist can access this kind of workload. We didn't, we knew that was going to come. We didn't have the appetite to really tackle it until now.
Let's talk about roles and access policies, because what you describe is that's definitely a thoughtful way to do it, and it really is. It aligns with best practices in terms of, okay, we have a known set of users and a known set of access or resources they need to access basically on a daily basis, and that's completely appropriate for you. When you turn on your laptop in the morning, you connect, you automatically get access to those set of resources. There's a different class of users, and certainly a different class of resources that we've seen customers want to be able to dynamically provision and tie to either a service desk ticketing system or some sort of unusual or break glass type of situation. So one example might be that you've got a large organization and your IT team is responsible for managing 1,000 servers and 500 pieces of networking gear. You have administrators whose job it is to do that, but they really don't need network access to all 1,500 of those devices every single day. It really needs to be driven by a business process, and that's great for a variety of reasons, right? It's more secure, it's auditable, it forces people to go through this process, and it's change tracked. So we kind of see things fall into a couple of camps around designing these policies. A fixed set based on roles like this, and many organizations will go down the path of, hey, let's create 4 or 5, 6 roles, single digit number. And then there's a different process for getting access to this much broader set of things. Chase, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's what you find, normally. One of the worst ones I ever saw was when I was still doing red team, and I saw somebody that had full admin access to basically everything across the enterprise, and they'd had it for 13 years. And the funny thing was, it was the #2 guy at the company. So, he was the one who set all this stuff up 13 years before, and still had full on role and access. And when you looked at the sort of roles there, it was like, well, you're the CFO now. Do you really need to have access to stuff that's over in dev anymore? And it becomes this proliferation of compromise points. And even looking through the history of exploitation, what you find is that it's not been usually some direct attack on any one thing that kind of makes it work. It's because of shared permissions and excessive privileges and interconnectivity and whatnot that weren't needed for business purposes. And a lot of times people in workshops will say, well, I can't put that into my business flow because people will not be happy with it. And I mean, the reality of it is, most of the time, once they take that position and kind of flip the script and say, look, we're putting a new policy in place, this is what it means. And the reason we're doing that is to limit possible compromises that could affect your paycheck. People kind of go, okay, I get that. And in that position of default, deny, and then allow it based on an actual justification makes a heck of a lot of a difference in improving the security portfolio, the capabilities that are there. And that also goes to the ransomware problem that we've had. Ransomware is actually not the end of days scenario you typically see. It's because of those excessive things, shares and privileges and whatnot, that it goes like wildfire. I can live with an infection on a machine. I can't live with an infection on an enterprise. And the way that you limit that spread is to basically say, unless there's a business justification, I won't allow this to just be on by default.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to encourage folks, if you have questions, please put them into the questions widgets, and we'll try to get to those in a few minutes. So before we shift to them, Chase, if we take a perspective that says, okay, we all believe that zero trust is the right way to go, and that organizations need to pull, push, and prod their organizations to do that through 2021. What should they be doing now in the last couple of months of this year as they get ready to wrap up projects and kick things off, so they can be, if we fast forward 12 months, that they're in a much better spot?
Well, I think really one of the things that's, and I mean, I've done this too, like I think we've talked about the demonstration videos we've done at Forrester on these types of solutions, is getting your hands into these products. It used to be when you were doing proof of concepts on systems and you were demoing systems, it was kind of a labor intensive, long-winded thing. Now with SaaS and with the way that we operate with cloud and everything else, you can demo a security suite or solution in an afternoon. And it's not, obviously it's not going to be full enterprise role, like all the bells and whistles, but it's enough to get you at least familiar with that. So I think that there's a lot of value in what's coming as far as closing out and planning for the coming year. Is if you see something that you think is well aligned to your strategic concept and you want to try it out, reach out and try things out. That's what virtual infrastructure is for. That was what SaaS is for. That's what these types of offerings are supposed to do. So don't kind of sit there and chew your nails and go, well, I think I can put this into my system in 2021. Give it a shot.
Right. Jalen or Jeremy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have the latitude now to construct some pretty elaborate systems, pretty ad hoc, and that kind of gives us the ability to really look at these specific pieces of equipment or processes and really analyze those, kind of separate that from the day-to-day business. And yeah, it's with so much kind of lifting up to the cloud, a lot of the offerings now are kind of coming from the cloud down into the enterprise, or into the organization. So yeah, I definitely find that that kind of getting your hands around a new interesting technology is much easier than it used to be. And things are moving at a much faster clip. So you kind of need to have like a team kind of evaluating that stuff in the background.
Yep. When we started this in 2017, there wasn't a lot of operational capability on the market. So we started by writing our own code, just prototype code, building our own trust engine, trust evaluation engine, and seeing what would be possible. Today, a lot of the zero trust model has been implemented and fully operationalized. It will continue to grow over time and mature, but there are vendors out there who, if you look past the zero trust label and say, well, how are you evaluating trust in real time? How are you calculating a trust level and applying it to access? How are you mapping a user and their identity and role and their device to workload in real time in an automated fashion without me having to manually edit a policy? If you ask those questions, you'll start to separate the marketing plays from the real operational platforms. And that's a good way to kind of build up on what folks like us have done in past years to get operational quickly. The other thing we've done in SecureWorks with kind of getting zero trust off the ground, we have a thing we call in IT, just start. In a security company, we love to talk about risk. What are the consequences of trying a new platform? You know, the consequences for risk at our company are pretty severe, right? If we have a breach, it's pretty much over at that point. It's very, we're trusted to secure and help secure our customers. So we found that if we just start in a very narrow, very targeted, take one user or one team, firewall them off or air gap them, and have them try something new and see if it works. We can build on that success and then go a little bit larger and a little bit larger, and then adopt company-wide.
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when, as you do that, you can keep both access paths open in parallel, so that if something fails or if there's a hiccup, then you can just say, just use the old mechanism today. For new environments, clearly, you'd want to just build this and architect this in from the beginning as the primary access path. But then you're going to be unconstrained by some of those existing legacy components. That makes sense. So I think let's shift to some of the questions, and please feel free, folks, to submit a few more questions. I'll paraphrase here, but the question is, what sort of snags or roadblocks are some folks hitting in as they look at their environments that might be very brownfield, very messy, that make it difficult for them to move forward, that maybe put some artificial constraints around this, that ultimately these pieces of technology may have been put in place years or decades ago. They're there, they're not really adding value, but they're difficult to change. Chase, why don't you start out and maybe share some experiences that you've seen and how people have kind of hacked away at this Gordian knot of legacy technology?
Yeah, well, it kind of goes to a little bit of understanding of what the plot plan scheme is for that infrastructure. Most of the time when I've talked to folks that are looking at that old system, they kind of know that it's the dark recesses where the cockroaches probably live, and they're trying to remove it anyway. So I really think if you can, what makes a lot of sense that's come from clients is try and just isolate it and control access to that based on a pretty granular approach, and just accept that it is contested space. And your goal is to continually, like Jalen's saying, age off of that and get it down to a much more small and manageable level. Like, you're probably going to wind up with some old nasty stuff in the basement. As long as that old nasty stuff is limited and it's not proliferating everywhere, and you can kind of know this is a door in and out, you can live with that. I mean, in reality, for a whole lot of reasons, we're moving to a world of more cloud, more virtual. That old stuff is aging away. So I think it's not necessarily a wasted effort, but I think it's a less optimized effort when you try and do these things in that infrastructure that you're probably going to kill off in the future anyway. It just becomes a return on investment gets exponentially lower the more that you spend in it. So trying to move into what the future kind of looks like Jeremy and Jalen are talking about, and really being able to just control what you can control there and consider it contested space and keep a really good eye on it. It seems to make the most sense.
That's great. Another question here is about, I'll paraphrase here. If an organization already has a lot of sunk costs, let's say in a VPN or maybe a NAC or some other type of traditional infrastructure, and maybe it works okay, or that at least they've learned to live with the pain. How can security teams help make an operational or financial justification to move to zero trust if you have an organization that maybe they don't believe or don't have confidence in the security drivers for that? I don't know. Any of the panelists?
That's a tricky one. Yeah, so we don't have a lot of, Jalen has a lot of landscape to look at. We're very focused on what affects us in my role, and so we didn't have that difficult of a time shifting to this new mindset. But as Jalen says, it's this iterative process. It's a very long process. You have to kind of strategically look at your resources and figure out how they're being serviced today and what that need is and why they're there, and extrapolate that forward and say, okay, well, if we're shifting to this zero trust model, what legacy components now can be deprecated because they're kind of just they're sucking up electricity and not really helping the matter. It's this big tidal shift that's happening across the industry, and I think luckily things were moving in that direction before the pandemic even started, and so we were kind of in a good place to get to where we needed to get to. If this would have been 5 years ago, it would have been a lot more tragic. But the industry is kind of moving, like Jalen was saying, like pushing people off into the cloud with SaaS applications, and it's causing a lot of us to reevaluate how we even perform our duties and how we bring these resources to our people. So it is this. Luckily, it can be iterative, but at the same time, it's like Jalen's saying, it's this long-running process that you have to really get behind and think about and strategize against. But it really is the way that you have to move forward because these perimeters are breaking down.
I think that's a good point, which is that it really is not necessarily the security team saying, hey, we have to change things. It's the security team and the business saying things have changed. And COVID is a great example of that. But even outside of that, there's been a gigantic shift up towards SaaS and infrastructure platform as a service. And organizations need to take advantage of it from a fundamental business level.
Yeah.
It's thinking about the legacy technology. I've certainly seen where enterprises, sometimes where they struggle is that they have a piece of legacy technology that does a certain thing or operates in a certain way. So they build a web of dependencies around it. And you've got now 4 or 5 systems that maybe they're purchased or maybe they're custom built that depend on, okay, I've got this security piece that, it sends me an event or it logs this type of thing. And then I parse the logs and I do something. And it becomes sometimes very difficult to unravel that incrementally.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm sure you've seen some horror stories around things like that, Chase.
Yeah, I had a workshop with a client. I won't say who they are, but I'll just say that they're big. And for them, the question came up during the workshop of, well, we have these punch card systems, and immediately it was like, you have what? And they were saying, well, we're going to figure out how to do zero trust with these punch card, pieces of infrastructure. And it was like, I think you should just go to single in and out and watch the electrons, because punch cards and ZT probably aren't going to be very well aligned.
One thing we found at SecureWorks was in connecting with legacy environments and legacy systems. When you look at zero trust implementations today, many of them just focus on web-based connectivity. The Google Beyond Corp model in 2017, when we started, we liked the trust evaluation, but we said, 90% of our connectivity and security, use cases have nothing to do with a website over port 443. It's access to data centers and workload and SSH and service-to-service communications and things. So that's what we like about Appgate. We were able to take the trust evaluation in Google Beyond Corp, but then we were able to use the IP level connectivity and routing level connectivity that Appgate offers to almost provide, well, essentially for us, it was a protocol independent, a machine protocol service protocol independent way to connect users with workload environments. Yes, we have lots of websites and web services that people can access, but our primary method, our primary use case for Appgate is to connect a user with a VPC or with the infrastructure of a legacy data center, or services internally for machine server administration and things. So we liked the IP level approach that Appgate gave us, and we could wait for the web connectivity and SaaS space to mature in the next few, in the intermediary years until we get here.
Great, thank you. This has been terrific. We're right at the top of the hour, and we're just about out of time. So I do want to give Chase the last word here. So any parting thoughts, Chase, as folks look forward to really embracing and adopting Zero Trust in the next year?
I mean, I think the proof is kind of in the pudding. I mean, this is where the market has gone. The reason the market has gone there is because this is what makes sense for the future of work. The numbers indicate that the trend is going to continue to be in this remote area. Everybody's more digital, more virtual, that type of thing. So the question that organizations should ask themselves is, do I think that I can continue to employ practices that have proven to be failed over the last 30 years and think that it's going to get better for me as we go forward into a new era? Or do I start to realize that I've got to dig myself out of this hole, think about the strategy and apply it where it makes the most sense, and then align my technology to that? And really, I think people should continue to ask that question of, how fast do I think I'm going to get here? It's a viable question, but you've been building this for a while. It may take you a bit to get out of that hole, and that's okay. Like Jalen was saying, and Jeremy too, like, this is not a one and done. This is a marathon, and it's going to take some time and effort. But the reality of it is, as you align to this and as you push forward, the benefits begin to happen by just the nature of that evolution, which is where we want to be.
Exactly. Great. Well, thank you so much, Chase. And thank you, of course, Jeremy and Jalen. Thank you all for attending. There are a number of handouts in the handout widget if you're interested in getting some more information. As always, have a great day, stay healthy, and stay secure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.